Welcome to our continuous series of virtual voices. We appreciate your letters and comments. Please continue sending them. We are very pleased today to welcome Dr. Frank-Jürgen Richter, who is going to be discussing, who is the chairman of Horasis and who will be talking about his programs. Our moderator is Apurv Kabir Gupta, who is on our board of directors. Apurv, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Durbach and Dr. Frank-Jürgen Richter. It's a pleasure to have you join World Information Transfer's Virtual Voices series for everyone joining around the globe. Dr. Richter founded Horasis. It's an independent think tank for global business. He works with business people, politicians, intellectuals, advisors of governments, private sector organizations on topics such as globalization, trade, and sustainable development, particularly with a focus on emerging markets in Asia. He's a frequent public speaker and has authored multiple books, almost 37, authored and edited, and numerous articles on global strategy and Asian business. Dr. Frank-Jürgen Richter was also a director of the World Economic Forum between 2001 and 2004. Dr. Richter, it's a pleasure to have you join us today. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Apurv. Thanks so much, Christine. What a pleasure being with you this morning. Thanks so much for inviting me. Let me start by stating that the current state of the world is quite gloomy. Whenever you open the newspaper or you read the news on your iPhone, you read about tragedies. You read about COVID, the pandemics. You read about declining economies all around the world, about climate change and the consequences of climate change, but also about geopolitical conflict and rising populism and antagonism. So the world seems to be out of order, I have to say, and maybe reaching a point where we don't really know if things get better very soon or maybe much worse in the next few months. But let me start with what triggered everything this year, especially, of course, COVID and the pandemics. And we all know the result and the impact of COVID. Of course, a lot of people losing their life all over. We are now facing a second wave and maybe a third wave. Some people say it might be a permanent wave, even so a vaccine might be in development. Yes, you know, COVID, of course, disrupted everything. We had the lockdown, economies are in distress, and more conflict is also happening globally because there's a lot of finger pointing, for example, between China and America. America says, you know, China is where the pandemic came from originally, and that didn't do enough to kind of keep it where it is. But I would say, you know, wherever, you know, the pandemics originated from, the world has to deal with it. And it's a global issue, and we need more global coordination and not less coordination. I'm a big fan of the United Nations, if I may say. And I know, Christine, you have a very strong link with the UN. The UN is doing an amazing job by bringing people together, by mitigating the risk of conflict. We know that the Security Council is there and trying to mitigate the risk. And this year, as you might know, we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. And it just actually started, the so-called UN Week. We had the opening of the General Assembly, and the UN Secretary General is speaking about his vision for a better world and about the new social contract. And I think that's what we need in the tradition of the United Nations, with this very long history, 75 years up and down. And I think now we are really in a very difficult time. And we all have to come together, you know, to repair all those issues and to start again. And if I say we, it's not just governments, it's not just the UN, but I think it's all of us. And I think we all have an obligation to try to improve the state of the world, to come up with a better vision for the world and for its citizens, and to come up with very tangible solutions. So we at Horasis try to do that. And maybe let me speak a bit about the organization I founded 15 years ago. As you said, before, I used to be a director at the World Economic Forum, known for Davos. And I left creating Horasis in 2005 because I was convinced that we need more dialogue and more communication, and we have to integrate more emerging markets like India, like China, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and of course, Africa. And in the starting years, Horasis hosted big summits focusing on those countries. We started with China. The Chinese government invited us to create our first Horasis China meeting, which was held in Geneva. The idea was to hold the China meeting outside China and to help Chinese entrepreneurs to reach the world and to work on typical misunderstandings, cultural issues, political issues facing Chinese entrepreneurs and Chinese government. Over the years, we added a few more meetings. We're also hosting a big summit on India every year, but also summits on Southeast Asia, and we are planning to host a summit on Africa very soon. But now we are hosting our major summit. It's upcoming very soon, next week actually, on the 1st of October, held on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. And we have a very good mode of collaboration with the UN. There will be several heads of the UN attending, including the Undersecretary General, who is in charge of the 75th anniversary of the UN. His name is Fabricio Hochschild. But we have also the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights attending, and many other UN officials, including also 4 head of states. So we have 4 presidents joining and around 20 ministers and a lot of celebrities, even from the entertainment industry. We have academicians, we have NGOs, and it's a bit reflecting, the whole platform we would like to create where different stakeholders can collaborate. Because we strongly believe that one group of stakeholders alone, it's not able to solve all the issues human mankind is facing. Take, for example, climate change. It's not enough that governments give us kind of, the framework to tackle climate change, but I think we all have to contribute to that, starting at our household, the way how we, put in the lights, the way how we, put our garbage somewhere, and I think we all have to start at our home. Then companies, obviously, companies, have been polluting a lot. They're still polluting because the first and foremost goal of a company is to earn money. It's based on capitalism, which, is the kind of engine of our economies. But sometimes capitalism is very short-term oriented, and it's basically, to boost the share price and to earn a profit, which is nothing wrong. Companies should do that. They have to earn money, but they should also see the broader public good and see how companies can do something beneficial, for example, in terms of fighting and tackling climate change, and maybe starting, on their own products. A lot of companies usually put corporate social responsibility on the top and say, we are in CSR, we're in the philanthropy, but it's usually like an add-on. In principle, the whole company is still very focused on short-term profits. What we believe at Horasis is that, the whole idea of conscious capitalism should be incorporated in the DNA of each company and not just being an add-on at the end. And that's, a deep conviction. And we are working with many CEOs, with some of our members, large Fortune 500 companies. At the upcoming Horasis Extraordinary Meeting on October 1st, we got, for example, the CEO of Verizon, Hans Vestberg, one of the largest telecom companies in the world. And we got also companies from India. We got, for example, the chairperson, Roshni Malhotra of HCL Technologies. She is India's wealthiest female entrepreneur, and she's very much into philanthropy herself. So we are very selective whom we invite on board in this kind of collaborative effort. So on October 1st, we will have around 850 speakers. It's maybe the largest online event held ever. So clearly it's an online event. It's not in person. We are not meeting at the UN building because it's impossible. It's all online. And we try to kind of feature all the elements of personal interaction online. So there will even be digital cocktail parties where participants can meet, and based on a random algorithm, you can have like a 5-minute power chat with everybody else. There's also a way to connect with each other during the event. So it's highly interactive. A very long day. We start early morning to get a lot of people from Asia, and then we start at 11 p.m. European time to get the US West Coast as well. As I said, maybe the largest online event held ever by any organization. And what is the goal? What would we like to achieve? What is the kind of rationale behind? The idea is that we should unite, we should inspire and create, come up with very concrete solutions. Unite, obviously, because we want to bring everybody together on this online platform to put a positive spin on how the world is moving, and try to kind of leave all the populism and even protectionist movements we see in the world, and try to have this positive spirit where everybody is joining, uniting, and joining hands for the betterment of this world. Inspirations, because we need to think outside the box. We can't just push the button and continue as we did in times before the virus, but we have to come up with new solutions, creative solutions. We have to inspire the future, and we have to shape the future. That's the utmost goal of Horasis at the end of the day. And we also come up usually with very concrete measures. We are producing a report, a white paper, or white book. It's actually quite a long paper, where we give ideas, coming out of the discussion, because we believe that 1 + 1 is not 2, but 11. If you put a lot of people in a room, there's a lot of energy and a lot of creativity, and that's exactly what's happening at Horasis. There will be also sessions on climate change, I mentioned, on protecting the oceans. We have sessions on conscious capitalism, and several sessions on the SDGs, on the Sustainable Development Goals, and how companies can contribute in the spirit of a new global compact. The global compact was also inspired by the UN some 10, 15 years ago. And nowadays, we talk about the SDGs, but I think the global compact is still very important, because it's a strong alliance of companies supporting the goals of the UN. So that's a bit, the canvas of what's happening at the Horasis Extraordinary Meeting. And I would like to take this occasion to invite everybody to join. I know that today a lot of people from all around the world are listening to this webinar. And so please let us know if you would like to join, and would love to invite you. I should maybe say, and maybe coming back to my initial words, I started saying that the current state of the world is quite gloomy, and there's so many things happening in the world. And I believe that COVID is kind of aggravating and kind of making things which don't work in the world worse. And you see that, people who live in very poor conditions in Africa, but also in the industrialized countries of the West, in America and Europe, there are a lot of poor people. They are, if I may say, the losers in this crisis, because they have no way to defend themselves. They have no way to say, those are our rights. And there's a certain kind of distrust between the haves and the have-nots. And this all started already 2 years ago. Remember, in the streets of Paris, the so-called Yellow Vest movement, where a lot of people go on the street and protest against the so-called elites, people who are holding power, who are holding money. And we see this kind of distrust and kind of discontent all around the world. So from Paris, from the streets of Paris, it kind of swept into Latin America. We had protests in Chile, a country which has been very quiet and stable until now. We have had protests all around in Europe, but also in Asia, we have, even in the Middle East. So it's some people even say it's like a new revolution in the making. Think about the French Revolution 200 years ago, and as the Yellow Vest movement started in Paris, I think we should maybe go for this comparison that a revolution again is in the making. Nowadays, revolutions are not just confined and limited to one country or one continent, but with social media, with IT, with everything digital. Of course, people connect with each other and talk about issues, and it could be, to the good or to the, let's say, to the better development or to the worse. Think about what Greta Thunberg did with her movement and climate change. She could mobilize people from all around the world, not just the kids in the beginning, but now everybody is behind. So here we see technology is playing a very important role, but it could also go to the contrary, where we see a lot of hatred, people going to the streets and fighting with each other. And unfortunately, this is kind of happening more and more. Think about the Black Lives Matter movement in the US and all the unfortunate things around and the fighting, and it's all around. And maybe you might say that human mankind, or let's say humans by nature, are born to be good or bad. Think about Thomas Hobbes, the English philosopher, who said basically in Latin, homo homini lupus, so man is man's wolf. And that's what we see, unfortunately, that there's more and more hatred and more fighting. And I would like to call on a world which is based on altruism, on pure altruism, where we don't really expect a return on what we do, but we first give something ourselves. And I think that could be a very good motto for everybody, if we just give instead of just taking. And, if you would have this principle of altruism everywhere in the world, in politics, in business, I believe that the world would be a much better place to live in. And unfortunately, there's a so-called Machiavellian mindset. Niccolo Machiavelli, who lived in northern Italy during the Renaissance period, he basically says the end justifies the means. And that's something we have to stop. So we need to collaborate. We have to love each other. I think love is an ultimate goal. I think it's very important. And we should be altruist in whatever we do. So here I see the mission of Horasis, coming back to what we do in our big summit next week, which is based on altruism, getting all these different stakeholders together. We don't have an official mandate like the UN or like a government. But we are a group of supporters, people who like our mission and would like to contribute, and there's no kind of second thought or principle behind. The principle is just to help and to be good with each other, to try to overcome all kind of conflict, and to be positive in whatever we do. Maybe let me stop here for a moment, Apof and Christine, and would love to get your insights, questions, and maybe we can also take some questions from the floor.
Well, I just would like to say that I basically love your concept of unite, inspire, and commit, and you expect people to commit. You want to expect people to commit to altruism. One of the problems that I see in working with people, that before you can give to others, you really have to take care of yourself. I tell all my patients, charity begins with oneself. If you take care of yourself, then afterwards you have enough energy and enthusiasm to take care of others. If you don't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of others. And that brings me to the next point, that when people have children they cannot take care of, these children are from the beginning born unwanted, and they have a tremendous amount of resentment. And so I was one of the speakers at the 1994 Population Summit, UN Population Summit in Cairo. And my speech was very short, and I said that we should concentrate on having every child born to parents who can feed them, clothe them, and educate them. Now, that was in 1994. As you know, since 1994, we have added we have added almost 3 billion people to the planet. And so I think that we need to start first, in my opinion, with that problem, because as we grow and there's more and more population, more and more children that are born that are not taken care of, you cannot expect them to be altruistic because they are very wanting and needing themselves.
Yeah, I fully agree, Christine, and thanks for the comment. I think we have to start with self-esteem and protect ourselves. You know, I'm not preaching a 100% altruism. You know, if we are totally altruist, you know, we give away our clothes in winter and we die, right? So, you know, the principle maybe I would like to explain is what I call weak altruism. So weak altruism means, of course, you protect yourself, right? You do the right things, and it's very important. You know, I start my day with a bit of yoga, for example, and I try to do some meditation as well. And it's all like, you know, the self-esteem, getting the right level of energy. And once you got this, you know, you can share your energy. But if you don't have energy, you can't really share anymore. That's very important. But, you know, weak altruism as a concept means basically you're not expecting any return when you give. So you give something, and maybe on the very long term, right, something comes back. But it's not that you calculate. It's not like putting like a balance sheet and say, oh, because I give you something, I need something. You know, it should be much more open and much more long-term oriented. And I believe, you know, the principle of long-term orientation is so important for companies as well. You know, think about quarterly reporting. It's all very, you know, short-term oriented. And sometimes companies say, we fire, you know, 10% of our employees, and then, you know, next day the share price goes up. So that's not logic. It's not how it should be. It should just be the contrary. And we should have very long-term oriented companies who unite, inspire, and create, and who say that, you know, whatever they do should be good for human mankind. It should not be polluting. It should not harm people, but it should be something good, you know, what they do.
Well, I completely agree with you, but I think that it really begins with the family. It begins with the basic elements of what every human being needs. And if you cannot provide that, in my opinion, that's where governments and society should start with, making sure that every child that is born is taken care of. And that doesn't happen, then we would eliminate a lot of problems like youth, abuse, slavery, and all the other elements that make this world so difficult.
Yeah, you know, I agree, Christine. And, you know, the family is the most important unit in a way in human mankind, you know, like caring for each other, you know, then having kids and leading them the way, giving them education. You know, that's also like a bigger family around. You know, you think about friends, for example. Friendship is so important, you know, having very good friends, not just superficial. It's so easy to say, you know, you're my friend and so on. But, you know, friendship is something very engaging. It's also very long term, right? You have to look after each other. And, you know, what a wonderful gift if you can say that, you know, that you have like a lifetime friend, you know, who can call every day, every night, whenever you want, as a principle, right? And it's something, we should look after. You mentioned also, Christine, the role of the state. How much should the state get into like family lives, looking after our, social life, giving funding, for example, education to our kids, and of course, at different models. I know that in the US, for example, the state is kind of backtracking. We don't have a strong state looking after everything like in Europe. In Europe, it's different, right? When we lose our job in Europe, there's always like, insurances coming in. There's maybe for like 2 years, you get the same amount of money. There's a so-called Nordic model, countries like Sweden, Finland, Denmark, they are very successful economically. There's great companies in those countries, and still, they look after the people. Nobody is on the street. It's I call it maybe like a social model of capitalism, and I think that's maybe something we should go for. Of course, we don't need bureaucracy, right? Bureaucracy is the wrong thing, but we need also the state caring for us and putting the right frameworks, the right regulations. And it should always be in interaction between the citizens and the state.
I can't argue with that one. Upper questions?
Definitely. Dr. Frank-Jürgen Richter, that was an excellent presentation and sort of a very, very good overview of all of the things that Horasis has been involved with. I was attending the Private Sector Forum just 2 days ago, under the auspices of the UN General Assembly. And the main takeaway from that was that the business of business is no longer just business. And I think, your sort of annual meeting captures that entirely. One of the questions that I had was, you mentioned that one of the outcomes of your extraordinary meeting is the production of a white paper. Can you talk to us a little bit about what are the main objectives of that white paper? Is this a sort of consolidation of recommendations that goes to governments, or sort of do they turn into commitments that the private sector abides by?
Right. Yeah, it's a combination of both. First of all, we have note takers, taking notes in each session and see, what is the highlight, the conclusion in each and every panel. And, we got many different topics, starting from AI technology, digitalization, to more like even geopolitical issues. But yes, we try to summarize, the 4 or 5 most important highlights, and coming up also with novel solutions. Of course, it's not enough just to say we have to fight climate change, but it has to be something which goes deeper and say, how do we do that? What are the mechanisms? I'll give you an example. Everybody talks about the so-called fourth industrial revolution. There's been a lot of books written about saying that, the fourth industrial revolution is coming in, digitalization, artificial intelligence, blockchain is a new world, and everybody's, with this positive kind of view saying that, it will all make the world a better place, going this fourth industrial revolution. I have my big question marks. I believe that the fourth industrial revolution is leaving out the social factor, the human factor. And I would like to talk about the fifth industrial revolution. And it's one of the topics we will debate, how to reconcile technology with basic human needs, and how to make technology more human. And I think this fifth industrial revolution can really make a big difference. In the fourth industrial revolution, a lot of people will lose jobs, and unemployment will be on the rise dramatically, not just due to COVID or trade conflicts, whatever, but it's really
also automation.
Exactly, automation. Think about all the truck drivers in the US, linking between the East and the West Coast, hundreds of thousands of truck drivers that will all lose their jobs once we got, self-driving cars and trucks. This is visible in all different sectors. Then on top, of course, we got globalization and outsourcing, because, countries like the US are losing manufacturing, meaning that, what do we do with all those people losing their jobs? So the future of work is one of the main topics for us is focusing on, and to see what can we do. And I think there's not really an awareness in our governments. We think usually governments have a very short-term orientation. In most countries, it's like a 4 years cycle. There's a new prime minister, president coming in, and in the first year, usually they do announce a lot of changes. There are some changes happening in the third year, in the second year. In the third year, they're already thinking about re-election, and in the fourth year, it's all campaigning. So it's very short-term oriented. But who really deals with the future of work and the future of those who want to eat, who need education, and want to see a better world? I think not many people in government, and that's the reason we need platforms like ours, or what you're doing, Christine, at your wonderful organization, a very long-term orientation. And on the future of work, we want to publish a white paper and share it later on with governments and to see the reaction. And then getting in some of our main supporters, like CEOs of companies, who could back the finding and talk to the governments together with us. That's the idea, and I think that's where we can be very useful.
Right. That's incredible. Dr. Richter, I have a couple of questions coming in from Asia, so I'm going to collate them into one question for you to answer.
Right.
From your time as director of the World Economic Forum, with a focus in Asia, how do you think the landscape has particularly changed, not in terms of just regulatory and policy, but also in terms of business understanding of sustainability issues?
When I started at the World Economic Forum 20 years ago, Asia was still behind. Of course, we talked about the so-called Asian tigers. China was on the rise, but China just joined the World Trade Organization. India was still behind. It was a different time. Reforms just starting. Nowadays, India is a new global engine of economic growth. And it's happening in China, it's happening in India, it's happening in Southeast Asia. And we have seen double-digit growth in China until recently. Of course, China now growth is shrinking, also linked to COVID. But China was leading the change for many years. India, as the second power, I think could easily reach also double-digit growth. But now with COVID, of course, it's impossible. So yeah, things changed a lot. And also at the time, 20 years ago, we all talked about the Asian model of capitalism, which was very state-driven. There was always like a unit at the top directing everything. And this model originally came from Japan. The famous METI, the Ministry of Economic Development, basically created like long-term plans, and then everybody had to follow. Something in Japan called administrative guidance. And this principle then later on was copied by Korea, by Singapore, and finally by China. So China learned a lot from this model and had these long-term plans. And still China today actually is very long-term oriented. They have in Shanghai a so-called museum on the future, where they don't put like, old things like in museums usually do, but, things on the future, and to see how the future can develop. But, this Asian development model also got its limits. We see that Asia is moving more into kind of a mainstream capitalism movement, or let's say social capitalism. And it's much more similar to, let's say, Europe and America. Even so, and we talked about this before, you can't really compare directly, let's say, Sweden and America, right? There are many different models of capitalism, but Asia as such found its own way, and it's going more mainstream. There are a lot of global Asian companies who are even going for a listing at the New York Stock Exchange. So technically they're American companies, but of Asian origin. Asian companies are buying companies all around. Take, for example, the Japanese SoftBank, which is one of the largest investors in technology. Chinese state-owned companies are buying companies all around the world. And I think, we shouldn't limit, the growth of Asian companies. We should benefit from it. there shouldn't be sanctions. We shouldn't say, you can't buy this or this asset, maybe out of national security interest. But we should join hands. And it's always my motto. You feel this, Apoorv. I always feel that we should avoid confrontation and we should go for dialogue.
Oh, I definitely agree with that. I specialize in psychoanalysis, as you know, it's all talking. But what I wanted to ask you is, we had on this program Dr. Chantal Carpentier, who is the chief of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And she was talking about the fact that one of the big problems is two, mainly. One of the problems is that there's so many countries, developing countries, that are sending more than $1.5 trillion to developed countries in order to safeguard them instead of paying taxes and helping in their development. And the second one, that one of the other problems is the bank. The banks also have a problem of keeping money without distributing them so that the economies can develop and grow. So I wanted to ask, what is your perspective on it and your opinion on it?
Right. There are different aspects, and maybe the most important one is the one of taxation, and where to pay taxes and where to maybe hide money. A lot of companies have very creative techniques to move money all around the globe and to go for like a low tax environment. For example, in Europe, a lot of American companies invest in Ireland, especially high-tech companies like Facebook, Google, or Apple. Even so, the value added is not created in Ireland, but it's just kind of put there, and it's all according to law. It's like a loophole. But at the end of the day, I think countries where those companies are active should all benefit from tax income, and not just get small portion of it, because those countries have to distribute the taxes later on to their people. So I think we have to reform the global tax system, and the OECD is very much involved in this process of reforming taxes to have more like a just level, or a level playing field even, where we can say that it's a just taxation, and all countries and all citizens can benefit. That's very important. We have to be very careful when it comes to regulation. Regulation is not a nice word, and Wall Street doesn't like the word regulation. But we need a minimum level of regulation to avoid, tax evasion and even like money laundering, or whitewashing and all that, money laundering. And here we need regulations, and we need also a global coordination body, where we have an institution looking into that and avoiding all these kind of loopholes. At the end of the day, and that's always comes back in my kind of inner feelings, companies should have a social heart. Companies should not just go for the immediate profit, but should distribute. And it also starts that companies can help their communities where they're active, like maybe supporting the local cultural institutions, kindergartens, and so on. And be very active citizens and have this exchange with citizens sometimes. And we talked about the elites before, and the Yellow Vest movement in France. Sometimes the elites, they're kind of living somehow on an Olymp, right? And kind of look down to the earth. But sometimes they lose kind of the touch, what's really happening down in the streets, and this has to be changed.
Thank you. Very, very important perspective. Apoorv?
Frank, the questions are just pouring in, and I'm trying my level best to make sure that I consolidate them so that you can answer questions. That answer multiple issues that people have raised. One is specifically on the fifth industrial revolution that you have mentioned, which is one of the key focus areas of the Horasis conference. For everyone else's understanding, this is a term that regularly gets used in business. The first industrial revolution is the mechanization of utilities, water, power, steam. The second was mass production systems, assembly lines, electricity. The third was the advent of computers and automation. The fourth is now sort of robotics, AI, and taking sort of the computing power to the next level on how we produce things. And Frank has been talking about a fifth industrial revolution. So Frank, if you can sort of double click into how you mentioned that the fifth industrial revolution will be an era of reconciling technology to be a little more human, then that would answer multiple questions we have.
Right. Yeah. No. Very good question, and you have a very captive audience, and putting forward those questions. Yes. The fifth industrial revolution is starting now, and we see more and more technology having features supporting social interaction, betterment of societies, and not just the pure technology of digitalizing things, and having also always a long-term view. And it's good sometimes to use a catchword like the fifth industrial revolution, so we know what it really is. And in my dream, in my vision, I see the fifth industrial revolution not only happening in the Silicon Valley and maybe in manufacturing or let's say IT development in Bangalore in India, but everywhere. I think the fifth industrial revolution should be the new concept for our economy. And there's no doubt that digitalization is taking over. Especially now with COVID, right? We can't really do things in person anymore. Everything is digitalized, and we spend so much time in front of our computers. But where is the social interaction? Where is kind of the human touch? And here, the fifth industrial revolution is giving the guidelines, the ideas, how machines and humans can collaborate and really achieve a better result. There has been actually some discussion on the machines taking over and artificial intelligence being better than human intelligence. I hope it's not happening because just imagine that one day we'll be governed by machines. And I think humans should always be in the driver's seat. We should never forget this. And the fifth industrial revolution is putting special emphasis on this interaction between machines on the one hand and humans on the other hand.
Going back to Industrial Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, as you know, was started particularly in the United States based on the freedom for creativity for the individuals. And I can see why with the government, for example, in China and in India, becoming more dedicated to development and to creativity, while you have decided that you are going to focus on those two countries. Also, they have the greatest amount of people, even though India is pretty much almost catching up to China because of the one child per family, which in my opinion was the best thing that the Chinese could have done. That's my opinion. But how do you see that happening in Africa?
Entrepreneurship and innovation and creativity sometimes comes out of sheer necessity because people don't have enough to eat, people don't find a job, so they create their own company and maybe have a new concept. And it's maybe the reason why China has been so successful. Originally, China, we had mostly state-owned companies, which had a bit of Me Too, sometimes even like a copycat attitude. Today, China is maybe the most innovative country on earth. Think what's happening in Shenzhen. Shenzhen is a new Silicon Valley, and these are all private entrepreneurs. So many Chinese young people say, my goal is not to work for a company. I want to create my own company. And many Chinese actually go overseas. The founder of Zoom, the technology we are using right now, American company, he's Chinese. And many other Chinese did this. Indians the same. Many companies in the West are run by Indians, and some of the most amazing upcoming startups were founded by Indian entrepreneurs. So where does this creativity come from? On the one hand, necessity, for sure, but also instilling this entrepreneurial culture into a country. And, you know, we in Europe, I'm based in Europe, I guess we lost a bit this entrepreneurial spirit. We always hope that the state is just giving us everything. You know, there's a discussion in Europe, which is like a minimum base income. So we stay at home forever and you still get your, let's say, $1,500. And it's quite attractive to a lot of people, right? You don't have to work anymore, but that's not creative. And many people understand that they might want to do this maybe for 1 year or for 2 years. It's like paradise. But then they say, what am I for? What is my goal in life? What is my contribution to society? And then they give it up. And you know, America has always been the land of dreams and entrepreneurship. That's how the whole country was built. And I think America should never lose this and leave this out. But America should put more like the social touch to it. But entrepreneurship is important. On Africa, I think, you know, in Africa, something is happening. We've seen in China and India the necessity to survive. So people say, young people say, we create our own companies. And what we see actually now, it's another revolution in Africa. Basically, some African countries are kind of jumping into the next, you know, century and millennia. And instead of saying we don't need a first, second, third, fourth industrial revolution, we go immediately into the fifth industrial revolution, which is an advantage. You know, there are not many fixed telephone lines in Africa, but everybody got a mobile phone. So Africans are very good actually when it comes to design of apps and any kind of digital communication. And I think that's the future, and government should support this. You know, there's a theory saying that clusters like Silicon Valley or like Shenzhen in China, high-tech clusters, just emerge. There's no government involvement. I would disagree. You know, we need actually some government support. In Silicon Valley, actually, you know, the support was that many of those companies there got big orders from the defense industry. And because, you know, they're all placed there in California, you know, the whole kind of network grow. But initially there was some government support because, you know, the defense industry benefited from it. So yes, we need to find the right kind of balance between free entrepreneurship, creativity, and guidance by the state.
That's a very, very, very good point. Apurv?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Frank. We have a question from Heidi Kuhn, who is the founder and CEO of Roots of Peace. She asks, on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the UN. Oh, there we have.
Thank you so much. We are all so deeply inspired at this time of COVID-19. And my question to you was, on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, on the onset of COVID-19 has brought a new urgency to the conversation, highlighting even more the benefits of multilateralism. What needs to be done to make the world a better place? And how may we aim and aid the United Nations in this global quest?
I think, and I'm so glad to see you in person this morning. You know, I think you gave the answer in the last question. I think we all have to aid and support the United Nations. And there's been so much finger pointing recently. You know, some countries stopped payments to the UN. And others say that, you know, the UN is just like a big bureaucracy. I believe that the UN is the best institution we have globally, and we have to strengthen the UN. We need to strengthen multilateral thinking, where many different countries, but also companies can collaborate. We need a new global compact. We need to support the SDGs, and we need a stronger United Nations. The question is how to do that. And I think first starting say we have to talk about it. So like at our upcoming summit, the Horasis Extraordinary Meeting, and I'm so glad you are involved in it, Heidi. There, you know, we want to showcase the UN. We have a big session celebrating the 75th anniversary with the Undersecretary General in charge of the anniversary, and we have several head of states joining him, and we are highlighting it to a business audience. There will be several hundreds of business people listening, and usually what we see is that the so-called UN talk and the business talk are kind of separated. Totally different worlds. What's happening at the UN headquarters is usually just stays there. Of course, maybe there might be a headline coming out, but it's it. And the business world is just doing their business. And they talk about, financing, business plans, acquisitions, but there's no real kind of link. And that's what we want to achieve at Horasis. We want to strengthen the UN in providing the business angle, the private sector angle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Great. Frank, we have a couple of questions coming in specifically around technology and the ethical use of technology. I know you sort of expanded on your definition of the fifth industrial revolution, that we need to reconcile technology and humanity in a much more beneficial manner. But, regulation often sort of develops much slower than innovation takes place. So how can we reconcile this sort of gap between what the world is actually prepared to receive from a technology front, and how can we ensure that that technology, whether it's AI or robotics, is actually operated in a much more ethical manner?
Right. Yeah, I think we need to put the right people at the right place. Give you an example. In the UAE, in Abu Dhabi, there is a minister in charge of artificial intelligence, and it's mainly the first minister of this kind, who is looking into this from a very powerful position. I know there's, for example, a chief technology officer in Washington, D.C. as well, and I think it's the right move, right? That we have the innovators not only working with governments, but being the government. And regulators really understanding what's happening, and ideally regulators being the entrepreneurs. And I think we need much more kind of exchange between business and government. Usually, when somebody works for the government, he or she, after retiring from government, is usually going on the speaking kind of tour and earning his money, but it's not kind of going back to business. And I think I would see much more this kind of exchange, back and forth between business and government. Then we have a real understanding. And I think the UAE, as I mentioned before, they're doing it in a great, fantastic manner. The UAE is actually leading in artificial intelligence. You wouldn't believe it, but attracting a lot of foreign talent to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Likewise, Singapore has a very proactive approach when it comes to technology. They're attracted biotech firms already 20 years ago. Nowadays, Singapore is the heaven of biotechnology. And again, a very proactive approach, and government shouldn't be shy, in talking to the entrepreneurs and the innovators, the disruptors. I think disruption is here the right word to put, in the sense of Schumpeter, the Austrian economist, who said that basically we need creative destruction. And here, I think we need also platforms where the innovators and the governments can come together. And, there's so many silos. I mentioned, I think already a couple of times, but getting them into these networks, exchanging, and then looking into the ethical dimension of artificial intelligence, trying to always stay on top of the machine. Of course, using the algorithms, using the machine, they're very useful, but we shouldn't regulate them, but we should try to understand them and not having them taking us over.
Brilliant. That's an excellent summation of ethical technology, Frank. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to have Ms. Mariam Azam have another question addressed to you, Frank, if that's okay.
Yeah, great. fantastic. And, you know, it's great talking to you, and said a very captive audience, and great contributions in the very much the spirit of dialogue and friendship.
Frank, that was really amazing. I have a very simple question in that I know you've been working around the clock to create the extraordinary session next week in partnership with the United Nations, and we've been in touch almost on a daily basis, several times a day, and I'm very happy to be part of it. My question is, for the average person that is now can now access these meetings. As you know, the World Economic Forum was not accessible to most people. It was an elite organization with, and most people were financially restricted to even learn about it. So how would you recommend people can join this extraordinary session, like the average person, and learn about it? Because it is definitely an occasion for world leaders to address the public, and the technology today that we're using due to COVID, I would say, is enabling people to do that. So could you just expand on that?
Right, yeah, we very much, Mariam, believe in inclusivity. So it shouldn't be an exclusive platform just of, you know, the powerful people of this world, but everybody should join. So the meeting is open. So, you know, if your friends or everybody would like to register, they can just register for the meeting and you know, be part of it. And it's not just passively watching the videos and what's happening, but everybody can actually jump in and raise a hand in a digital manner and grab the microphone. That's a function we have. And also ask questions. So we want to have this exchange and a very inclusive approach, not just like a, you know, a fortress of those in power. In the future, we have to see, you know, how to develop the platform. Now we are 1% digital, of course, due to COVID. In the future, we might have hybrid meetings, you know, where we partly meet in smaller groups and then still have like the digital environment around, where then, you know, many more people can join. So the hybrid solution is something, you know, we would like to offer maybe next year, you know, when COVID permitting, of course. So we are constantly working on improving, you know, the interaction with those who would like to listen and would like to make a contribution. Of course, you know, we will also put all the videos on our YouTube channel the day after the summit, so everybody can watch it. It's not just limited to like members, right, to a club, but everybody can benefit from the knowledge we are creating.
Well, is there something of a registration that the public has to administer or inscribe to?
Yes, there's a registration, and we can maybe share it later in you know, like a follow-up email, and it's all on the website. So when people go on the website, they can see the registration and they can go there. And that's very important, right? That we are not just having the speakers, but a broader audience.
Can you put the registration on the video so that our audience can see it?
Okay, sure. And I will just, let me just see where it is. I'll just open a website here. It's always, let me see, no, that's not the right thing. Do you still see me? I guess you do, right?
Yes, Frank, and you should be able to share your screen if you're trying.
Yeah, you know, you just put, maybe if you can do it above horasis.org, which is our organization. And then you have to go on the Horasis Extraordinary Meeting, and then you see everything. So just go on horasis.org.
Yeah.
And then, you know, everything comes up. Also, you know, you see the people who confirmed and so on. And,
oh, brilliant. We can actually share the link after this meeting with all attendees, Dr. Durbach, and I think that would be
that's
very beneficial.
Great. That is excellent. And I just wanted to tell you to thank you very, very much for a very interesting, informative, and just inspiring presentation. And I know that especially our students and interns are listening and taking down a lot of information. I'm very grateful that you were able to come and be with us. And I just expect that your conference is going to be tremendously successful, and it will help you continue on with the inspiring work that you have been doing for so many years.
Thank you so much, Christine. It's an honor, and I was very pleased to talk to you, all of you, and the whole audience, of course. Very inspiring for me. I think that's exactly what I like to do, to share and to learn. I think, sharing is always learning, and so I'm very pleased to be with you today.
Dankeschön und auf Wiedersehen.
Dankeschön. Ja, vielen, vielen Dank. And thank you so much to everybody. It was great talking to you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank, for joining us. And thank you everyone who's joined from around the world and another series of World Information Transfer's Virtual Voices series. Please keep an eye out on your inboxes for our speaker next week, and we look forward to meeting you then. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Durbach. Thank you, Frank.